the title of the talk is Africa Digital Transformation for Growth and Development, Why IPv6 Matters. And I want to trace us through some context, constraints, and indicate a pragmatic path forward. So as others have said, we have the global IPv6 usage, which now exceeds about 40% of traffic. But in Africa, we are about maximum 6%, around 3% in sub-regions. And I look at this as an indicator of Africa's increased dependency on external resources and infrastructure. Because over the decades that I have been working, following IPv6, we have expanded considerably the number of people who are using IP. But we are seeing that the IPv6 usage is more or less at the same percentage levels in some areas. We have a few bright spots, that is Senegal, Togo, Gabon, and the Republic of Congo, where we are showing about around 20% capability, but the continental progress is very uneven. And I'm deliberately not talking about Nigeria because I'm in the presence of many gurus from Nigeria, and I expect you will be talking about this. So what do we see? We have an infrastructure deficit, the economics of dual stack versus CGNAT, the limited local content and hosting, skills gap, and governance uncertainty. The low 5G IoT deployment and fewer hyperscale enterprises reduced short-term demand signals for IPv6. And the low deployment of digital technologies, for example, we are not seeing, if you imagine that every school had a lab, how many more addresses you would need, but we don't see the deployment of digital technology in key sectors. There's a clear business case. There are a lot of costs that are linked with the workarounds like CGNAT. There's simpler addressing at scale, better performance, and future proofing. But yet, we are not seeing anything. We're not seeing the progress at the rate we wanted. So I'm going to skip this slide because we lost some time. Are you seeing the slides now?
No, and I haven't received it either.
Maybe you have filtered it. It's coming from the same address you have been sending to me. Let's see. Well, I think we'll give it up because
yeah, I think the tone was set already. Yeah, we're listening and carefully.
Yeah, you're listening and you're following it fine.
Yeah.
So we see it's quite ironic. I have this graph and it's showing that Central Africa is where we have over 6%, West Africa around 6%, North Africa just below 5%, East Africa around 4%, and Southern Africa around 2.5%. And you know that is not a reflection of the digital development in those areas. And what we actually see is there are a lot of workarounds. Why are people doing this? Most of us are using private IP through our telcos. The telcos have resisted going for IPv6. Their arguments are it's a lot of extra money if they have to change all their devices, but yet they are paying a lot for all the workarounds they use. Then we have the return on investment. They are not seeing that for the IPv6. And then we see that locally we have very few hyperscale cloud over the top platforms. so there's weaker customer pressure to deploy IPv6 end to end. And all the risks, the renumbering costs for the legacy firewalls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So our digital infrastructure deficits, like this very weak last mile broadband and power reliability issues, are keeping operators very focused on making bandwidth available. They are not worried about protocol upgrades. And then you have a legacy network, CPE without robust IPv6 support, increases replacement or upgrade costs, and then limited local data centers, IXPs, etc. So most of our traffic is exiting the region. And our local content, CDN presence varies by country. And as others have mentioned, huge training gaps. There's limited IPv6 hands-on experience in operations, security, and troubleshooting. I have a slide on operator realities with 4 points, but I'm just going to mention the public procurement rarely mandates IPv6. So suppliers often deliver IPv4 only solutions by default. And the vendor feature gaps for the licensing for IPv6 in older platforms is inconsistent when it comes to support in CPE firmware. Lots of change manager risks, the dual stack complexities. So the content and ecosystem effects of all of that. We have a lag, huge lag. And interestingly enough, where Starlink has come in, IPv6 usage jumped in several African markets because it nudged the incumbents to move. And then huge education and awareness gaps. And let me dwell a little bit on this because it affects policy. I believe that most of our policymakers, as the moderator pointed out and as has been pointed out in previous speeches, most of our policymakers lack a true awareness of the implications of this lag in IPv6 adoption. They look at it as a technical issue. They do not understand that it is hampering our growth, it's hampering our digital transformation, and therefore it's hampering our development. And I think that once we are able to communicate this effectively, we can see, we hope that policy will follow. Right now, you see that in some countries, when you go, you only find 2G networks that are actually operational, even though they'll tell you that there's 5G coverage. So the 2G, 3G, 4G is still very dominant. Device penetration is growing, but in some countries, let's face it, it's very, very low. You know, everybody talks about mobile, but in some countries, even mobile is very low, the access to devices, and particularly for women. And the IoT at carrier scale is just starting. We are not seeing, you know, the prevalence of IoT devices in Africa yet. And where you do see the deployments, they're using private APNs or NATed IPv4, delaying the need for IPv6. So there's no strong growth in 5G standalone and massive IoT, and the commercial push for IPv6 is very muted. So the governance and policy context, we will not discuss the implications of the legal challenge at Afrinic, so I gloss over that. But definitely in many markets, there are limited regulatory incentives or mandates to ship IPv6 capable services and CPE. And there's fragmented coordination across ministries, operators, and ISPs. That means we don't have cohesive national IPv6 programs. And I was so happy that the RECs were mentioned. We are West Africa, so let me focus on ECOWAS, but all the regional bodies, whether it's SADC, whatever, you see that in general, they are very weak when it comes to digital. They focus a lot on peace building and crisis. And meanwhile, the underlying causes of the crises are the lack of economic development. And for the economic development to happen, we actually need IPv6. So at the moment, we don't have any clear policies, whether it is at the REC level or whether it is at the national level for most countries. Nigeria may be the exception. But even in Nigeria, I wonder if you are taking the fight or taking the information to the general population level, because in my view, this should be one of the issues that we should worry about when we have elections. What is the political party's commitment to the IPv6 rollout? So they will tell you there's no customer demand. People don't ask. I mean, I cannot imagine a normal human being asking, is this address an IPv6 address or an IPv4 address? They can't. I mean, but we, as Starlink has shown, the use of the IPv6 can really improve the performance. And then the consumer will say, why is it that others are not able to deliver on this? And then we have this old argument, IPv6 is less secure. Well, I personally have never bought into this, because with any deployment, you have to deploy the security that's linked to it. And the modern stacks support IPv6 parity. I don't want to go into too much technical depth, the ACLS, et cetera, et cetera. We know that security is not a real issue. It is just being used as an excuse. And NAT, people say NAT or NAT equals security. NAT is not a firewall. Stateful filtering and proper addressing are still required in IPv6. So the business case for the IPv6 operator, avoid all the costs linked with your workaround. Simplify your addressing, end-to-end visibility for advanced services, telemetry, and zero trust architectures. Differentiate with IPv6 ready packages, enterprise VPNs, IoT connectivity at scale, and future-proof, easier peering, better CDN performance, and alignment with global best practice. So now I want to suggest to you, I have just 3-4 more substantive slides. We have some quick wins the next 12 to 18 months, and I see that I'm very much in line with what Dr. Abdullahi has suggested. First of all, we start with an audit, an inventory of our IPv6 readiness. Then we need to have a plan, look at our policies, our security, our security baselines. Then we have to pilot and enable dual stack in a single region, measure performance and support the impact, and then scale firmware rollouts for CPE, IPv6 on peering, IXP, and CDN interconnects, and publish the timelines to customers so that people become more aware. And IPv6 is not just, when they hear it, I experimented and I called a few of my contacts who work in software, and I said, do you know what IPv6 is? And I had to talk to them for 5 minutes before they said, oh, IPv6. Oh, yeah, I remember. I think we studied something like that in school. So these are supposed to be digital experts, and they are not up to date. Well, I won't comment anymore. So clearly we need quite a lot of upskilling. And I do think we need to target our universities. As you know, in my past life, I was the Director General of a Center of Excellence in Technology. And I can't overemphasize how important it is to focus on the capacity building at that level. But really, we also need to upskill the professionals who are already in the field so that we will require IPv6 in all new RFPs and public procurement. So we have a few momentum examples. I mentioned already Sonatel in Senegal, Unitel in Angola, and then the whole Starlink thing. And the mandate we want to achieve is that governments, all governments, are going to mandate IPv6 in public procurement. And I think some of you may remember what happened when the US did that and gave a deadline of 2025. And I hope others will comment on this further. This is just an opening keynote. And then we need to fund the national IPv6 programs, the training, the test beds, the IXP upgrades, and the CPE swaps for underserved areas. Let's not forget the inclusion dimension. And we need to stabilize the RII governance. Ghanaians don't like saying R. RIR governance and promote open peering content hosting initiatives. Publish transparent IPv6 scorecards for operators and government agencies. I wonder what would happen if, I hope there's some of our big telco people who are listening in. What would happen if we gave you a scorecard on IPv6? And I would like to end just by emphasizing that we have so many new opportunities. For example, there's a lot of work going on in African language at the moment. They're using large language models that have been developed outside of Africa, but we are hoping that some of these models will soon be developed in Africa with the data being hosted in Africa. And you can imagine that when we have that kind of solution available, there'll be so many people who are communicating with each other in our languages. Very important for foundational literacy and numeracy in our languages. We have AI tutors, adaptive learning platforms. We have connectivity demand, lots more broadband use, the campus Wi-Fi upgrades. I've talked about LLM-driven automation, e-governance platforms, the EdTech ecosystem growth, the policy, the funding, the industry response, and all of this leading to huge IPv6 growth. I had some references for you on my final slide, but the main thing, the main message I want to leave you with is we have been I'm trying to be diplomatic. We have not been committed enough to the growth and adoption of IPv6 on our continent. And that is perhaps because we have not appreciated its important role in development. My core training is as a development economist. So even though I've been working in tech now for over 20 years, when I look at these issues, I'm looking at it in terms of what does it mean for the future of Africa. So I'm confident that everybody who is listening in today is committed to a more positive future for Africa. And we have to make sure that IPv6 is part of that and we get our act together in terms of the deployment. Thank you all very much. A pleasure to be with you in Nigeria. I soon will be in Lagos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will have said a round of applause to our esteemed Dr. Dorothy for that very, very, very insightful presentation on the critical needs of ethical frameworks and everything she named here. One comment that spiked me is about the IPv6 being less secure than IPv4. some of these excuses we have out there, and people advocating for NAT being a security measure. Meanwhile, NAT was just a created feature to extend the lifespan of IPv4. And there is nothing like security behind that. There is no security in hiding behind a box. Because right now, if you do a quick research on the internet, you will notice that there are thousands and thousands of botnets in our networks in Africa. Meanwhile, our networks are around 95% netted. So how do we get all those botnets, all those zombie hosts on our networks if we think that is security?
I like the way you said it, zombies. We have resuscitated our IPv4 and they're walking around like zombies.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you very much. And that was quite insightful. And I would like to seize this opportunity to exhort us all here to make this not just another conference,